So let's talk a bit about chest aesthetics and what separates a gym cell LTN chest from a high appeal HTN chest. And before we get started, right, let's just get the obvious stuff out of the way. Your genetics matter a lot, right? Your insertion points, where your chest inserts, because some people, when you have really subhuman chest insertions, then you're basically never going to be able to build this part of the chest, and there's always going to be a gap, and some people might even have asymmetries. So yeah, there is a genetic factor, just like everything else, like just like everything else in your body and your looks. Yeah, so that's just the obvious stuff. But now let's get on to some stuff that you can actually change. So firstly, something interesting you should know is the sternum angle structure, right? Because some people have steeper sternum angles like that, and some people have flatter sternum angles. And the way you can find out is basically just by leaning against the wall or lying on the floor and putting an iPhone on your sternum, and or just put your phone on your sternum and then see what angle it forms. And chances are, right, if you find that you've been doing a lot of flat pressing, right? Flat bench press, flat machine presses, but then only your lower chest gets really overdeveloped and your middle and upper chest are kind of underdeveloped, then you probably have a bit of a steep sternum angle. Whereas someone else who has a flat sternum angle can do the same exercises, the same flat presses, flat flies, and just develop their chest much more differently. And this is something that I experienced as well in my first 1 year or so of training, where I would do, I would try and get a 225 bench press, but I had a steep sternum angle and I also had a moderate arch, right? Not a big arch, but a moderate arch on the bench press. And when I got to the 225 bench press, I looked at my chest and I saw that, hey, my lower chest is really overdeveloped. Not like really overdeveloped, but just overdeveloped in general. Whereas my mid chest is kind of empty, right? My mid chest and especially my upper chest as well were pretty empty because I had a steep sternum angle and I had an arch. Whereas someone else, I had like friends who would do the same, right? Get their bench press, but then their chest would be full in the middle. So especially if you have a steep sternum angle and you do a big arch on the bench press, that's going to end up making you a lot more lower chest dominant, which is going to be really bad for your physique. Because if you want to think of what the most aesthetic chest looks like, you just have to understand that the most aesthetic male chest is going to be the most dimorphic one, right? The one with the most sexual dimorphism. And when you have a saggy lower chest where it's actually kind of round like this, then it basically just kind of resembles breast, which makes it look almost feminine and not very sexually dimorphic. Whereas if you look at a square chest, right, like Jeff's side over here, or even this guy where you have a full upper pec, then that's a lot more masculine because it's more masculine dimorphic, right? It looks a lot more masculine. It's very different from the round breast-like appearance. So if you are someone with a steep sternum angle, then there's a few simple modifications you should make, right? Both to your flat pressing and also to your flat flies. So for your flat pressing, firstly, right, in general, you don't need a crazy arch if your goal is hypertrophy. If you have a minor arch, then it could be good for stability and yeah, just being more stable in general. But past a certain point, having a huge like powerlifter gym cell arch, then you're not really getting much more benefits other than lowering the range of motion so you can lift more weight, which is not the goal. So keep a minor arch enough for stability and but not so much where you kill the range of motion. And having a lower arch will help align the sternum angle as well. But mainly, if you are doing a flat press, then you just want to increase the incline slightly. So instead of doing, let's say, a flat Smith machine bench press, you do, let's say, 15 to 30 degrees, where you just raise the incline by the smallest amount on your bench, and that will be your new alternative for the flat Smith machine bench press. So for flat presses, it's pretty simple. Just increase the incline by 1 point. For flat flies, it's going to be slightly different, right? Flat flies, basically what you want to do is imagine you're doing a pec deck, right? This is you facing the side doing the pec deck, and this is like the pec deck machine handle. Basically, instead of grabbing really low like that, like some people do, where you would grab the pec deck handle lower than your shoulder height, you want to either set up the seat height so that you can grab the pec deck handle at shoulder height or even slightly above shoulder height, right? You basically want to align your arm path with your sternum angle so that it's almost perpendicular to your sternum angle, because that's how you're going to most effectively target just the entire chest in general, right? Not just your mid chest, but also your entire chest, which I'll get into the anatomy in a second. But either hold in the middle or a bit higher. I would recommend holding the pec deck handle at shoulder height, because if you go a bit too high, then for some people it might be a bit too uncomfortable. So yeah, that's the first point. If you have a steep sternum angle, you need to modify your flat press and your flat flies so that you don't end up with a overdeveloped lower chest, which is one of the least aesthetics things, most gym cell looks you can have on your body, and it will really just fuck up your physique. Next thing, like I talked about the anatomy, is you have to understand the anatomy of the upper pec, because like I mentioned, right, having a full upper pec like that instead of a round saggy lower chest is going to be the most masculine dimorphic look you can have for your chest. But the upper pec, right, the actual clavicular head of the pec, as in the head of the pecs that attach to the clavicles, are actually quite small. They're actually quite small. If you look at the chest, right, that is the upper pec. And most of what we would consider to be upper chest, let's say, usually this region is considered the upper chest, over half of it is actually going to be the middle chest or the sternocostal head of the chest. So the actual size of the actual upper pec is quite small. And also, if you look at the anatomy, right, the fibers attach upwards like that, almost in a similar direction to the front delts. And because of that, some of the best upper pec exercises actually resemble front raises, because the upper pec is just really good at raising the shoulder forwards, right? Like in a front raise. So imagine this is you, and then you pick up a weight like that, and then you raise it like that. That is actually the motion that is going to target the upper pec the most. And if you look at this internal moment arm study thing, you can see, right, the clavicular of the head of the pec has best leverage for shoulder flexion between 40 to 90 degrees. So basically, when you're doing a front raise, all the way from at the bottom to around 90 degrees, that's when the upper pec has the best leverage. That's also why if you want to do an effective upper pec fly, then you should do something like the low to high cable fly, where it's basically like a front raise, but you're also doing a bit of horizontal shoulder adduction where you're bringing the arms across your body. And that's also why if you want to do a incline press, which is a very effective upper pec exercise, you should be tucking your elbows in, because that's going to align the fibers better, right? If you look at the actual fibers of the upper pec, it's more like in this direction. So if you flare your arms out a lot, then that's actually going to be mostly mid pec and a bit of the front delts. So if you're doing a incline press, you should be tucking your elbows in like that. And next thing is, you don't actually need to do a chest press specifically. In fact, if you want to, you can build your chest with only doing flies. And the fly, this specific pec deck machine, is actually a very good chest exercise, because firstly, it's going to target the whole chest, right? It's going to target the whole chest because all three parts of the chest, if you want to consider the upper, middle, and lower chest, they all contribute to horizontal adduction, which is just bring your arms inwards like that horizontally, especially if you have the handle set at around the same height as your shoulder. It's just that the clavicular head of the chest will also bring your arms upwards like in the front raise, and then the lower chest will also bring your arms downwards like this. That's also why the dumbbell pullover could actually work your lower chest a bit. But right, if you look at this, right, some people, I actually had a friend send me a routine the other day where he would do the chest press machine and then do the pec deck. But if you actually look at the exercises, you would see that they are literally the same exercise, right? If you look at the arm path, It's literally the exact same thing. Your upper arm is moving the exact same way. It's just that this exercise will also involve a little bit more front delt and triceps. But pec deck, this is very good. If you only want to do this exercise, I would recommend doing some kind of horizontal adduction like this, and then doing some kind of shoulder flexion exercise specifically for the upper pec. But if you only want to do this exercise for your chest, then honestly you can. And it's very stable. It's really good at isolating the chest and giving you more motor unit recruitment. Yeah, you can literally only do this if you want, but I would still recommend doing a dedicated upper pec exercise, right? Because like I talked about, right? The upper chest is quite small. So if you want to do like the ideal chest training, then you only need 2 exercises. Just one flat press or fly like this, because that's going to train your entire chest, but mostly bias the middle part. And on top of that, do a dedicated upper chest exercise like a front raise or any kind of incline press or just any kind of press with your elbows tucked in. If you do those, you're going to effectively develop firstly the clavicular head of the chest, but also this part of the mid chest, which is half of what most people would consider to be the upper chest, and that's going to give you the most dimorphic and aesthetic chest. And of course, never do any direct lower chest training. It'll just give you that saggy chest appearance, and it's very subhuman, and it looks terrible. So if you found that helpful, you can go check out the BP Fitness System, where I talk about how to gym cell, how to assess your frame and your bone structure, some frame prodding, height prodding, illusion strategies, how to go on the raw primal diet, and how to use it to build muscle effectively, and how to do so without aging or stressing yourself, and also just some science-based lifting stuff, so that once you understand the blueprint for the highest appeal physique that you can build, you can go and reach that as fast as possible. And there's also the Discord community as well, right? The private Discord server where we have forums, text channels, voice channels. And yeah, this is just a few of the videos on what they would look like once you join. So go check that out if you're interested as well. And I'll see you in the next video.